The story centers on Paul, his girlfriend Natalie, and Ben, and the strange events that happened to them. They lived together in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Lincoln Park area of Chicago. They had been living there for only 3 months. They all worked together at the same call center, and their lives seemed perfect, except for one strange thing. Every day, when they woke up at 3 a.m. for their call center shift, they found the lights in the bathroom, kitchen, or dining hall turned on. Upon questioning each other, they determined that none of them had turned the lights on the previous night. This unusual event began 3 months prior, when they first moved in. They kept the matter secret, fearing their friends would mock them. They usually returned from work around 5 p.m. Their housekeeper would arrive promptly at 6 p.m. Sometimes the housekeeper brought her child, who would play throughout the house and mess with their belongings. One day, Paul and Natalie returned home and found the housekeeper's son playing in their living room. They initially assumed the housekeeper had arrived early. However, they were surprised because the housekeeper was nowhere to be seen in the house. They thought she might have left her child playing there and gone to work next door at the Smith's house. Paul was very angry, believing it was inappropriate for the housekeeper to leave her son unattended in their home while she worked elsewhere. After waiting about an hour, Paul and Natalie went to the Smith's house next door to ask about the housekeeper. They were stunned by the Smiths' reply. The housekeeper had not come to their house at all that day. Confused, the couple returned home, but this time the child was nowhere to be found in the entire apartment. Although they were troubled by many questions, they were late for a party, so they quickly got ready and left. Around 8 p.m., Ben returned home after working overtime. He knew nothing about the previous strange event. When Ben opened the door, he found the bathroom light on, as usual. Since he was about to shower, he didn't switch it off. He went to his room, retrieved his towel, and headed toward the bathroom. As soon as Ben opened the bathroom door, he was terrified. The floor and walls of the bathroom were covered only in blood. A scared Ben immediately closed the door and ran toward the apartment's main door. Suddenly, his steps stopped when he heard a noise coming from his room. Trembling, Ben advanced toward his room. He was shocked by the scene. He saw the housekeeper's child sitting on his bed, hiding his face in his knees. Ben asked the child what he was doing there, noting he hadn't been there moments ago. The child slowly lifted his face. The child's face had a strange intensity, and his lips held an odd smile, as if containing many secrets. Deeply frightened by the blood in the bathroom and the appearance of the child, Ben immediately ran out of the house. Following Ben's frantic phone call, Natalie and Paul left the party and rushed home. The three gathered their courage and went inside. The events, the lights turning on, the blood splatters in the bathroom, the strange presence of the housekeeper's child, and his sudden disappearance created a storm of questions. When Ben took Paul and Natalie to the bathroom to show them the bloodstains, astonishingly, there was nothing there. Around 10:30 p.m., the three were unsure if it was safe to stay the night. Paul called the landlord and recounted everything. The landlord informed them that 10 years ago, a family had lived in that apartment. Due to heavy debt, the head of that family first brutally murdered his wife and son and then committed suicide by hanging himself. Learning this made staying even a moment longer in the house overwhelmingly difficult for Paul, Natalie, and Ben. They managed to endure the night, waiting for morning. They decided that they would leave that house and move elsewhere as soon as the day broke. The next day, when the housekeeper arrived, Paul, Natalie, and Ben descended upon her, bombarding her with questions about her son's strange behavior and mysterious appearances. After remaining stunned for 5 minutes, the housekeeper finally spoke. She told them that she had no answer to their questions because she did not have a son. The story begins with Ethan Miller, a man currently living in Los Angeles and working at a call center. When the events first began 17 years ago, Ethan lived in the Brooklyn, New York neighborhood of what might be called Baggy-Hearty. Ethan was only 15 years old. Ethan's father had his own business, and his mother was a history teacher at a school similar to Midtown High School. Ethan's parents initially dismissed his problems as delusion, though they slowly started to believe he was telling the truth. At night, whenever Ethan slept, he would dream of a 15-year-old girl who was crying. When he asked her why she was crying, she would weep even louder. This nightmare occurred every night. Eventually, the dreams intensified and began occurring during the day whenever he fell asleep. Each time he woke from the dream, he was drenched in sweat. His parents were unsupportive, but his sister, Sarah Peterson, was his only confidant. As Ethan grew older, he completed his schooling and moved on to college. On his first day of college, Sarah accompanied him to drop him off. As Ethan approached the main gate, he saw the 15-year-old girl he had been dreaming about for years. The girl was standing right in front of him. Ethan told Sarah, "Look, this is the same girl who comes into my dreams." However, the shocking thing was that Sarah could not see anyone standing at the entrance. Ethan tried to convince his sister, but she was unable to see the girl. Ethan became hysterical, shouting that Sarah was lying because he could clearly see the girl. This time, Ethan noticed that the girl was not crying, but smiling. After this incident, the nightmares stopped. However, the girl began appearing frequently during the day in the open sunlight. Astonishingly, no one else could see her. When Ethan shared his troubles with his college friends, they mocked him and called him crazy. Ethan began crying constantly and slowly descended into depression. During this difficult time, Ethan met a girl named Olivia Davis. They gradually fell in love and decided to get married once they were financially stable. Olivia became the sole source of happiness in Ethan's dreary life. The strange occurrences, which began around 1995, finally ceased in June 2008. Although Ethan was growing older, the girl he saw never changed. She always looked 15. Ethan kept his haunting secret from Olivia for nearly 10 years. Prior to their wedding, after a customary engagement party, Ethan and Olivia decided to spend some time together and traveled to Aspen, Colorado. One evening, they went hiking up a mountain peak to watch the beautiful sunset and take pictures. Ethan carried a pair of binoculars. While they were climbing, Ethan saw a family descending the slope. Walking right in front of that family was the same 15-year-old girl he frequently saw. Ethan froze and stared at her, and the girl stared back, smiling. Suddenly, Ethan turned around and began running swiftly down the hill. Olivia, confused by his behavior, ran after him, asking what was wrong and why he was running when they had planned to go to the top. Ethan did not answer any of her questions and kept running fast until they reached the bottom. Once they stopped, Olivia was too distressed to ask any more questions. She eventually asked him what his problem was. Before Ethan could answer, someone touched him from behind and called his name. Ethan turned around, terrified and sweating despite the cold mountain air of Aspen. He shouted at the girl, "Why are you bothering me? Why do you follow me around?" After listening to his outburst, the girl simply said, "Uncle, your binoculars fell down." Ethan grabbed the binoculars and looked at Olivia, who was staring at him strangely. When he turned back to the girl, she was gone. He asked Olivia if she had seen the girl, but Olivia shouted at him, asking why he was talking like a maniac and claiming she saw no one. Ethan was convinced Olivia was lying. This was the first time he had ever heard the girl's voice. He remained certain that he had seen and heard the girl who appeared in his dreams and daylight sightings. Olivia was furious, so to appease her, Ethan decided to tell her the biggest secret of his life. Olivia initially did not believe him, but after speaking with Ethan's sister, Sarah Peterson, she finally became convinced that Ethan was telling the truth. Despite understanding the reality, the revelation caused ongoing tension because Olivia could not forgive him for hiding the truth for so many years. They argued late into the night and finally went to sleep. That night was the last night Ethan would be troubled by the girl. He had one final dream where the girl spoke to him saying, "Perhaps you don't recognize me. This happened 40 years ago. You murdered me and my mother to steal our property. In my last life, you were my father." She explained that sometimes seeing him made her cry out of fear and sometimes made her laugh when she observed his troubled condition. The dream abruptly ended and Ethan woke up. After that night, Ethan never saw the girl in his dreams or in daylight again. A story exists about a man named Michael who possessed an unusual ability. Since childhood, he could see certain people around him whose presence others could not perceive. This power eventually became his profession. Michael would speak to these invisible entities, a unique gift bestowed by nature, through which he helped many people solve their problems. The story's other main characters are Robert and his wife, Rochelle. Rochelle was a US resident. Robert was the son of Mr. Nelson, who held a very high position in a department equivalent to the US Department of Transportation and was financially well off. Mr. Nelson had sent Robert to the USA for postgraduate studies in computer engineering. While studying there, Robert met Rochelle, and they fell deeply in love. Robert married Rochelle against his parents' wishes, which granted him US citizenship, and they lived a happy life together. Initially, Robert's relationship with his parents suffered, but time eventually healed the rift. The birth of their beautiful daughter, Annie, helped reconcile the family. Mr. Nelson, thrilled to become a grandfather, visited them in the USA and asked Robert to move back to a coastal US state, noting that major IT companies there could employ both him and Rochelle. After 2 years, in 2003, Robert, Rochelle, and Annie moved back to a US coastal city. Robert's father had purchased a large, separate bungalow for them to live in. Robert and Rochelle loved the house, particularly because its beauty was enhanced by its location near the ocean. It was in this house that a series of bizarre and terrifying events began. Robert claims that he witnessed his wife, Rochelle, intentionally push herself toward death. About 2 months after moving into the new home, Robert woke up around 1 a.m. and realized Rochelle was not in the room. He searched for her and went up to the roof, where he was horrified to find Rochelle standing right on the edge. Had she taken one more step, she would have fallen to her death. Robert silently crept up behind her and yanked her back in one quick motion. Rochelle looked at him strangely, as if many questions were hidden in her eyes. She had no idea how she had gotten onto the roof alone at that hour. Rochelle thought she might have been dreaming, but the events were real. Robert suspected she might have been sleepwalking, but this was not the case, as Rochelle did not have a history of sleepwalking. Rochelle could not remember anything about how she reached the roof. They soon forgot the incident and returned to normal life. One day, Robert returned home late, around 1 a.m. He noticed the front door was open. Robert was certain Rochelle would never make such a mistake, so the open door intensified his concern. He called out for her, but after checking the bedroom and calling 4 or 5 times, there was no sign of Rochelle. Breaking the strange silence, he heard his daughter Annie crying, the sound coming from Annie's room. Robert rushed there, his legs trembling with fear. Annie was sitting in a corner of the room, while Rochelle stared intensely at her with a strange smile on her face and rage in her eyes. For the first time, Robert physically restrained his wife. Suddenly, everything returned to normal. Rochelle had no recollection of what she had been doing to her own child just moments before. Annie, however, remembered everything that had happened. Annie told her father that she had been sleeping when someone suddenly pushed her off the bed. When Annie regained consciousness, she realized it was her mother. Her mother was saying something in an unusual language, replacing Urdu with anger. Annie reported that her mother was sometimes crying and sometimes laughing to herself. She also described Rochelle letting her hair down and wildly shaking her head. Annie concluded that if Robert had not arrived on time, she might not have survived. The very next day, Robert sent Annie to stay with her grandparents. He planned to immediately consult a psychologist. That night, Robert woke up and Rochelle was missing again. After searching the entire house, he found her again in Annie's room, staring fixedly at the ceiling fan. When Robert shook her aggressively, Rochelle looked at him furiously and began shouting obscenities at him in an unusual language. Rochelle also started throwing objects at him. Robert gathered his strength and managed to subdue her. As she gradually calmed down, Robert quickly hospitalized her and requested all possible tests. All the test results came back normal. Doctors could not understand why Rochelle had been admitted, as she appeared perfectly fine. Unable to bear Rochelle's condition, Robert finally told his father, Mr. Nelson, all the details. This led to the introduction of Michael. Michael was the individual who could see deceased people whom others could not. As soon as Michael entered Robert's house, his demeanor changed. He clearly sensed a presence in the house. Robert and Michael rushed to Annie's room, where Rochelle was resting, after hearing a peculiar sound. They found the bedsheet wrapped around Rochelle's neck, with the other end tied to the fan. Rochelle had attempted suicide. Robert and Michael's timely arrival foiled the attempt. Rochelle shouted insults at them in a strange voice. Michael took Rochelle's hand and began chanting religious verses. Initially, Rochelle calmed down, but moments later, Michael started sweating profusely, and his chanting suddenly stopped. Robert, acting quickly, pulled Michael out of the room. About an hour later, Michael regained consciousness. He told Robert that they absolutely had to get Rochelle out of that room. Michael and Robert re-entered the room. Michael was mentally prepared this time. He used all the spiritual knowledge he possessed to try and overcome the spirit. This time, he was successful. Together, they forcefully removed Rochelle from the house. The astonishing part was that as soon as they exited the house, Rochelle's health fully recovered. Michael then revealed the shocking truth. He explained that the old owner's wife of that house had committed suicide by hanging herself from that very fan due to her husband's infidelity. Michael believed that because of her husband's betrayal, the spirit could not stand the presence of any other woman in that room. Rochelle is safe today, but that house remains abandoned.